Hey guys, today I'll show you a sci-fi thriller TV series named Alice in Borderland Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with an obsessed gamer named Alice, a wastrel who is incapable of anything else except the game. He has an exceptional younger brother who managed to secure a job for him through connections. However, Alice gave up on the job interview to indulge in gaming. His brother lamented his lack of ambition, reminding him that unlike games, life doesn't offer second chances. Their father shared the same sentiment, urging Alice not to hold his brother back anymore. Angered, Alice decided to leave home to avoid his bullshit family. He contacted his buddies, Kichi and Chota. At that moment, Kichi was busy in the bar, not working but flirting with his boss's girlfriend. When the boss appeared unexpectedly, a fight broke out. Kichi, unwilling to back down, beat up his boss and lost his job. Chota, on the other hand, was reluctantly handing a stack of money to his mother, who had been brainwashed by a cult. Under the dual pressure of work and family, he chose to skip work. Alice didn't receive replies from his buddies and started playing with a Rubik's Cube as he walked. Then, Kichi and Chota replied. They agreed to meet at Shibuya Station and head out for drinks. While observing the bustling crowd, Chota suggested that if zombies appeared in Shibuya, everyone would be bitten and turned into zombies. Alice jokingly suggested that if that were to happen, the only survivor would likely be Kichi, a skilled fighter. Kichi, however, seriously said that the ultimate survivor would be Alice, the gaming expert, and urged him to live a good life and stop hanging out with them. Afterwards, Kichi hoisted Alice on his shoulders, celebrating his decision to leave home. Their boisterous antics drew many sidelong glances. The honking of a car brought them back to reality. They had unknowingly ended up in the middle of the road, causing a car to rear-end another. Seeing the police show up, the three cleverly ducked into a Subway men's restroom and hid in the stalls like ducks. After a while, they heard someone desperately banging on the stall doors. They dared not make a sound. Then, the restroom lights suddenly went out. After everything quieted down, they stepped out of the restroom. But when they did, they were completely stunned. The subway station, which had just been bustling, was eerily quiet. The shopping center was now empty. There was no one else in sight except for them. They looked at each other, completely clueless about what had happened. Kichi returned to the bar where he got fired. The table was still set with steaming pasta and coffee. On the counter lay the boss's girlfriend's half-smoked cigarette. Chota rushed back to the IT company where he worked, only to find the office was completely deserted. Looking out the window, it seemed as though the whole world had come to a standstill. Alice ran onto the street. Several cars were parked, but there wasn't a single person in sight. The three friends regrouped, realizing their phones were now non-responsive. As night fell, they sat down cross-legged on the sidewalk, wondering if this could be a disaster drill. They laughed like madmen at the absurdity of the situation. Suddenly, the LCD screen on the building behind them lit up, saying the game was about to begin and urging the players to follow the arrows. The group noticed a red glow above a nearby building. Deciding to investigate with his friends, they found an old edifice named Game Building. Following the arrows, they arrived at an elevator. On a nearby windowsill were several phones. As they picked up the phones, facial recognition activated, indicating that game registration would close in 2 minutes. At that moment, they encountered a woman named Shibuki, who then threw out Chota's work badge, which he'd kept in his shirt pocket. The badge was instantly burned by a laser. She further explained, once they crossed the line, they couldn't leave and had to play the game. Alice went to inspect the laser, which suddenly shot through the ceiling. It was a close call. Just then, a high school girl ran over. The three men tried to stop her, but she had already crossed the boundary. Shibuki handed a phone to the girl. The phone prompt soon announced that registration had closed and the game, Live or Die, was about to begin. The difficulty level was the 3 of clubs. The rules were to choose the correct door within the given time limit and leave the building within the same time frame. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened. Shibuki entered first. Alice and his friends followed her smelly suit. When the elevator doors opened again, a prompt came from their phones telling them this room had a time limit of 2 minutes and initiating a countdown. Before them stood 2 doors, one with a cute girl symbolizing life and another with a skull symbolizing death. Chota found it amusing and started recording a video on his phone. Meanwhile, the high school girl was terrified and wanted to go home immediately. Alice wondered what would happen if they chose the wrong door. Shibuki didn't answer, only insisting that the life door must be the correct one. As they spoke, thick smoke began to rise from the floor. The phone warned they had only 30 seconds left. Shibuki exclaimed the answer was life. "Open it quickly." Wanting to escape as quickly as possible, the high school girl pushed open the life door. As soon as she entered, a laser beam hit her head, and she dropped dead like a piece of soup. While everyone was still in shock, Shibuki had already pushed open the death door and hidden inside. Kichi and Alice followed her immediately. Seeing that Chota was still in a daze, Alice quickly pulled him along. Just as they closed the door, flames erupted from the floor, leaving them shaken. The phone then alerted them that the time limit for the current room was now only 1 minute and 50 seconds. The choices remained the same: life door or death door. Shibuki explained that this was a game where a sacrifice had to be chosen within a certain time limit. But she reminded them that the life door or the death door wasn't important. What's important was choosing someone to open the door within the time limit. As everyone argued and refused to open the door, poisonous smoke began to rise from the floor again. Alice decided to risk opening the death door, but at the last moment, he hesitated. Kichi decided to open the life door himself, on the condition that Shibuki should open the door next time. Thankfully, the life door was safe. Everyone quickly took refuge inside as the room behind them went up in flames. The time limit for this room was now 1 minute and 40 seconds. For every room they entered, 10 seconds were deducted from the limit. This time, Kichi shouted at Shibuki to open the door, but she chickened out. Kichi then urged Alice to think of a solution because in the past, he had easily solved puzzles they couldn't. Alice shook his head in denial, but Kichi persisted, saying that when they were busy working, Alice was always busy playing games. In anger, he punched the protesting Alice, which ironically made him come to his senses. Alice declared to open the death door with only 10 seconds to spare. He opened the door alone, and sure enough, it was safe. They ran into the room as the countdown began again, 1 minute and 30 seconds. To figure out the real exit, Alice explained there was a car parked between the game building. It's 4.94 meters long. The building is about the length of 4 of those cars, which is roughly 20 meters. His foot is about 28 centimeters. This room is around 6 meters. There's an evacuation map of the building next to the elevator. It's almost square-shaped like these rooms. If the building's side length is 20 meters, it could contain at most 3 rooms. While explaining, Alice quickly sketched it out and found the real exit was the death door. With only 10 seconds left, everyone rushed towards the death door, narrowly escaping yet again. At this point, everyone felt a spark of hope as they had managed to pass through several doors. However, Alice froze when he saw a wall with no doors in front of him. He quickly called out to his companions who were about to open the death door. The room they were currently in was located in the back left corner of the building. The door leading to the outside of the building should be the death door. But Alice remembered that there was no gap between this building and the one next to it. The life door led to the room where the high school girl had died. Why wasn't there a door leading to the back of the building? Just then, Alice remembered that Chota had recorded a video in the first room. With only 30 seconds left, Alice quickly checked the video and discovered that the room the high school girl had opened had no door, meaning the room where she died wasn't a square. There was another room behind that door. With only 5 seconds left, Alice and his companions rushed into the life door. Chota, who was running last, got his leg burned by the fire. Then a 10-second countdown started. Alice warned Shibuki not to choose the life door this time. He then opened the death door and led his companions out. The room instantly burst into flames. The survivors, having narrowly escaped, fled through the narrow corridor and escaped the building via a ladder on the outside. A message arrived on their phones congratulating them on clearing the level. However, Chota's leg was still burned. Shibuki went a short distance away and picked up the 3 of clubs from a table. Their phones simultaneously informed them that the game survivors had been granted a 3-day visa, which would allow them not to participate in the games during those days. At that moment, a staggering man walked towards them saying that his visa expired today and he wanted to quit the game now. No matter how many levels you pass, there's no end. Before he had even finished speaking, a laser beam shot him in the head, killing the man instantly. Soon, all the lights went out and the world was plunged back into darkness. Shibuki said that after midnight, anyone whose visa had expired would be killed. If they didn't want to die, they had to keep playing the game. Suddenly, several laser beams shot down from the sky in the city. It seemed many people had their lives taken away by the lasers. A short-haired girl stood on the rooftop, coldly watching the scene unfold, wondering what on earth had happened to this world and what would become of their fates. The scene then shifts to a girl, Yuzuha, following his father from a young age, traversing across all the famous mountains and rivers. In the process, she mastered real skills in leaping onto roofs and vaulting over walls. In the dark night, she quietly promised her father that she would survive all challenges. Now, the Shibuya district was eerily quiet at dawn, with only a few crows flying low. During the visa period, Alice found a sedan, but he couldn't start it no matter how hard he tried. The fruits and vegetables on the seat were giving off a rotten smell. The group of 4, including Alice, sought temporary shelter in a shopping mall. Chota discovered that all electronic devices using chips like cameras and digital clocks were not working. He suspected this was caused by an electromagnetic pulse attack. He had once read a report online that such a weapon could instantly destroy all electronics in an entire city when shot into the stratosphere. Alice wondered if that were the case. Why were the mobile phones they used in the game still working? Just as he voiced his doubts, the phone unexpectedly shut down by itself. Kichi picked up a dagger in the supermarket for self-defense. Shibuki found a battery-operated cassette stove. The 4 of them barely scraped together a warm meal. Shibuki asked them what they were doing when everyone disappeared in the apocalypse. The 3 men said they were hiding in the same toilet stall. Kichi asked Shibuki what she was doing. Shibuki felt embarrassed to tell the truth, as she was in bed with her boss at that time. She lied, saying that she was organizing documents in the meeting room. In reality, she was taking a shower when the lights suddenly went out, and when she came out, her boss was gone. Shibuki had participated in a game in the subway 3 days ago, where poison gas had been used. All the other participants had died vomiting blood, but she had survived. Alice found it strange because he knew people had disappeared just yesterday. Moreover, the severe rot of the fruits and vegetables in the car didn't make sense. The only thing he was sure of was that there was a mastermind behind the scenes, secretly controlling the players' movements and killing players whose visas expired. Chota believed that this could be done by implanting a microchip with a positioning system into the human body. Shibuki mentioned that a Nordic tech company had once commissioned their company to conduct an experiment in virtual reality, creating a world identical to reality. Kichi insisted that he would never confuse the virtual world with reality. After all, Chota's burns were very real. Seeing Chota in such pain, Alice and Kichi decided to go back to the game the next night. They had to get used to it in advance and rely on their combined strength to pass the game. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to lead the injured Chota through. Besides, they could also use the game to find a doctor to treat Chota's burns. As night fell the following day, a 7-story apartment building suddenly lit up. When Yuzuha arrived, several other competitors had already gathered. A rookie boy in a cap approached and asked where all the people of Tokyo had gone. As he spoke, a burly man named Aguni walked over. Alice and Kichi arrived soon after. At this point, a message came on their phones. Registration had ended, there were 13 participants, and the game was about to start. The difficulty level was the 5 of spades. A real estate broker explained to Alice and Kichi that spades represented physical challenges, clubs required team cooperation, diamonds tested intellect, and hearts were the trickiest, requiring manipulation and betrayal of teammates. The higher the number, the more difficult it was to pass. Then the rules for the game of hide and seek came through on their phones. The players could not be caught by the ghost, and the conditions for passing were that the players had to find a base within one of the rooms and touch an object within this base during the game time. They had 20 minutes, after which time a time bomb would automatically detonate. Elsewhere, Shibuki saw Chota praying and asked if he believed in God. Chota said he didn't, but his mother was deeply religious, which led to him being bullied at school. It was Alice and Kichi who saved him. Kichi was good at fighting and popular with girls. Alice was smart and came from a prominent family. Chota felt he himself was poor and worthless. Shibuki said that people like to be around those weaker than themselves because it gives them a sense of security. Chota disagreed, insisting that Alice and Kichi were not like that, and asked if Shibuki had been betrayed by others. Shibuki agreed, asking if Chota felt the same. Shibuki's response triggered painful memories for Chota. The broker stayed close to Alice and Kichi, assessing whether they could be his partners. The game officially began, and everyone stood where they were, afraid to move. Yuzuha suddenly felt fear and jumped off the balcony. Alice and Kichi were on the 5th floor, ready to find an unlocked room on this floor. As they approached the stairs, gunfire sounded. The 3 cautiously moved forward and saw a blood-covered person fall. As Alice and Kichi poked their heads out, a ghost wearing a Ferrari horse mask opened fire at them. They turned and ran, going down 2 floors before Alice pulled Kichi into a corner on the 3rd floor. They waited until they could no longer hear the ghost. But the ghost caught the broker and ended the broker's broken life. A man in a suit was so scared that he decided to quit the game, but the moment he touched the laser door at the entrance, he was sent straight to meet Jesus. Then 2 girls fell in a pool of blood. However, Shibuki and Chota wrestled their tongues despite the chaos. She told him that she was in bed with her boss when the incident happened. She said she and Chota were the same kind of people and threw her heavy body into his skinny arms. Her action reminded Chota of the time when his mother became obsessed and offered herself to a priest, prompting him to pray once again. After careful observation, Alice noticed that the ghost's vision was obstructed by the horse mask. This could potentially be their breakthrough to win the game. Thus, he ran to the center of the building and shouted that the ghost was currently on the 2nd floor. His vision was limited due to the mask. They just needed to inform the other players about the ghost's location. Then they could all scatter and find the base. Upon hearing this, Yuzuha quickly relayed the ghost's location to everyone. Unexpectedly, the ghost traced the sound to find Yuzuha, who prepared to flee. She frantically signaled to an oncoming player, but the player was stunned and got killed. Yuzuha climbed up to the 5th floor via a pipe, narrowly escaping. At this point, there were 8 minutes left until the game ended. Just as the rookie boy was about to open a door, a gun started firing at him. The boy was so scared that he curled up in the corner, not daring to move. Alice risked his life to pull the boy to safety. Kichi told Alice and the boy to go ahead while he tried to stall the ghost. However, Alice was worried. At this moment, Aguni came over, accurately reporting the ghost's height, weight, and skills, and speculated that the ghost was likely a military officer or police officer. Just then, a man with a headband brought over a fire extinguisher. Alice noticed that he and Aguni were wearing identical bracelets. Aguni handed a fire extinguisher to Kichi, asking him to get ready to hunt the ghost, and instructed Alice to find the base. Suddenly, Yuzuha volunteered to split up with Alice to find the base. She then nimbly jumped down to the 2nd floor, leaving Alice and Kichi dumbfounded. The man with the headband was responsible for luring the ghost down. However, when the ghost actually approached him, he panicked because Aguni didn't seem to have any intention of helping. The man with the headband was instantly riddled with bullets from the submachine gun. Just as the ghost was about to shoot at Kichi, Aguni lifted the fire extinguisher and sprayed it at the ghost. The ghost started to shoot wildly, firing several shots but missing each time. Kichi seized the opportunity to attack while the ghost was reloading, but the ghost was unscathed. The ghost kicked at Kichi, but Aguni quickly came to help. Kichi then used a dagger to fiercely stab the ghost's back, but he once again flung Kichi away and drew a long dagger to stab at Kichi. In the nick of time, Aguni kicked at the ghost. Alice found several apartments all locked up one after another. Suddenly, he noticed an apartment door riddled with bullet holes. That was exactly where the rookie boy had been attacked by the ghost from a distance. If the ghost was so concerned about this apartment, perhaps that was where the base was located. So he quickly approached the apartment and saw a silver-haired Taro also walking over. Their thoughts aligned. Just as Alice grasped the doorknob, he suddenly questioned why the ghost was chasing them when it could simply lie in wait here. But with only 3 minutes left until the end of the game, they had no choice but to enter the room and find out what was going on. In the darkness, another horse-faced ghost appeared. Alice pushed Taro out of the way, saving him. The ghost's bullet missed its mark, and Taro took advantage of the moment to stun the ghost with a taser. Before they could recover, the ghost launched another attack. Alice locked the inner room door and suddenly noticed a button on each side of the wall. They needed to press both at the same time to clear the level. So he opened the window and called for the others to help. Aguni was still at a standstill with the ghost. To end it quickly, Aguni pressed his face against the dagger and engaged in close combat with the ghost. Finally, the ghost in the base broke through the wooden door and barged into the room where Alice was hiding. Alice ducked and lunged at the ghost, trying to snatch the gun. Yuzuha used all her strength to jump through the window, taking the taser thrown by Taro and stunning the ghost. In the last second, Alice and Yuzuha pressed the buttons simultaneously, causing the bomb timer to stop. Then, a message on their phones congratulated the players on successfully clearing the level. The ghost also removed its mask, revealing a woman. Then, the collar around her neck exploded. Kichi and Aguni were also saved. It turned out that the ghost was also a person forced to participate in the game. Their task was exactly the opposite of Alice's and the others. At this moment, a voice came from the walkie-talkie on the headband guy's body, telling the guy to go back to the beach, and they had found the answer. Kichi turned around, only to find that Aguni had already disappeared. Alice felt guilty, believing that he had killed the woman in the horse mask. Yuzuha told him that this wasn't anyone's fault. It's incredible what they had done just to survive. After that, Yuzuha walked away coolly. Taro found a piece of paper with many lines drawn on it from the body of the deceased woman. He held it in his hands, studying it over and over. Shibuki's visa was due to expire the next day. In her past, she had gone as far as having a relationship with her boss she loathed, all for the sake of climbing up the ladder. So now, she was determined to survive and return to her original life. Seeing Alice and Kichi return, Chota took the initiative to greet them. Kichi said that if they could reach the beach mentioned in the walkie-talkie, they might discover the truth about the disappearances. He encouraged Chota to clear the level with them that night. Even so, Chota was worried, given that his leg was severely injured. Alice was still feeling guilty about the death of the woman with the horse mask. He mistook Shibuki for her in a moment of distraction. He told Shibuki that someone had died in front of him the night before, and yet he had survived. He wanted to live. Shibuki said that when she participated in the game for the first time, she was just like him, wanting to survive no matter what. Kichi returned to the bar and found the diamond ring he had bought for the girl he liked. He planned to give it to her once they reached the beach. As night fell, the screen in Shibuya Square directed the players to the game venue. Alice and the other three followed the game instructions, crossed the boundary, and arrived at the game field located within a botanical garden. There were tools such as hammers, axes, and chisels on the table, as well as safety glasses and mobile phones. They picked up the phones for facial recognition, then the phones instructed them to put on the safety glasses. As soon as they put on the glasses, they locked in place and couldn't be removed. Their images appeared on the big screen, and the safety glasses activated an eye-tracking system. At this point, the phone announced the end of registration and the imminent start of the hide-and-seek game with a difficulty level of the 7 of hearts. The broker once mentioned that hearts represented games won by manipulation and betrayal of partners. Moreover, a difficulty level of 7 was likely to be quite challenging. In the game, one person plays the wolf while 3 others play as sheep. Only the wolf can clear the level when the 15-minute game ends, while the collars of the sheep will all explode. The 4 of them were stunned because this meant that only one of them could survive by the end of the game. The remaining 3 would die. At that moment, the phone indicated that Chota was randomly selected as the first wolf, and the wolf would shift among them through eye contact. The countdown for the game began. Chota desperately tried to remove his collar. Alice tried to stop him, warning that if he tried to forcibly remove it, the collar might explode. Just as he was looking at Chota, Alice became the wolf. Feeling helpless, Alice turned to Kichi, who then turned into the wolf. Shibuki shouted that the game was flawed. If only the wolf could survive, then the sheep couldn't hide. As she was speaking, Shibuki turned into a wolf. She began running in an attempt to survive. Kichi understood that it was not the sheep who should hide, but the wolf. Shibuki kept running. Kichi kept chasing. Chota begged Shibuki to stop running and suggested they work together to beat the game, but she refused. Shibuki tripped and was caught by Kichi. She closed her eyes and refused to look at Kichi, not wanting to transfer her wolf status to others. Kichi took out a knife to scare Shibuki, plunging the knife into a tree trunk. Shibuki took the opportunity to poke Kichi's stomach wound with a stone. During the fight, she happened to see Kichi, which turned him into a wolf. Shibuki, unwilling to give up, smashed a stone into Kichi's wound. Alice found Kichi. The moment they made eye contact, Alice became the wolf. He tried to calm both Kichi and Shibuki, suggesting that they could pass the level if they cooperated. Seeing that the two didn't listen, Alice turned and ran. Chota, hearing his companions fighting each other, began to pray to the gods with tears in his eyes. Alice was cornered by the two. Shibuki demanded that Alice give her the chance to live. She said he was always living in a daze before, and there's no point in letting someone without the will to survive live. Just as Shibuki was charging at Alice with a knife, Chota rushed over and knocked her down, telling Alice to run. She questioned Chota about whose side he was on, reminding him that they had slept together the day before. Alice tried to use glass as a mirror to remove his safety glasses, but it was no use. He picked up a pair of pliers to cut off the collar, but the image of the woman with her collar exploding stopped him. In the end, he gave up, apologizing in despair. He remembered his father saying that the key difference between him and his brother was that his brother had something he was desperate to pursue, while he did not. At this moment, Kichi shouted through the earpiece, saying if Alice just wanted to continue living aimlessly, then let him be the wolf. Chota also said he didn't want to die just like that. Kichi picked up the diamond ring that had fallen. He remembered the good times with the girl he liked. Alice was crying because only Chota and Kichi treated him as a friend. Kichi had once said that his dream was to buy a large ranch in Australia and invite Alice and Chota to start drinking from daytime, while Chota said he wanted to write a software program to deliver the highest grade steaks using automatic drones. Remembering all this, Alice could not help but weep. At this point, there were only 3 minutes left until the end of the game. Alice decided to quit the game. If someone had to survive this game, it shouldn't be him, so he called out loudly for Chota and Kichi. However, Chota had covered Shibuki's mouth and hidden in the bushes. Upon hearing Alice approaching, Kichi also went into hiding, giving the chance of survival to Alice. Alice frantically searched for his two companions, wanting to give them the chance to survive, but they both remained silent. With only 1 minute left, Kichi finally said, as long as he was with them too, he could forget all his troubles. He then recalled the time when they made shaved ice and udon noodles in the heat of summer. Chota laughed and replied that they were very happy then. Alice shouted for his two companions, but they still didn't show themselves. Chota, laughing, encouraged Alice to survive. Shibuki was also moved by the friendship of the three and gave the chance of survival to Alice. At this moment, there were only 30 seconds left until the end. Shibuki and Chota held each other. Kichi lowered his head and thanked Alice with a smile. As soon as he stopped speaking, his collar suddenly exploded. Alice watched in horror as Kichi fell in a pool of blood. Chota and Shibuki also left this world forever. Witnessing the tragic death of his friends, Alice completely broke down. He let out a desperate scream to the heavens, his heart filled with guilt and regret after the game requiring betrayal of teammates finally ended. Yuzuha, who had been accustomed to surviving in the wild since childhood, hunted a rabbit in the park for dinner. On her way back, she saw Alice lying motionless on the ground. After learning that Alice had not died but had lost hope in life, she quietly left. The next day, she found Alice still lying there, his body soaked by the rain, and couldn't help but feel compassion. Once, Yuzuha and her father sat on a mountaintop admiring the view. She asked her father what he would ask for if God really existed. Her father said he hoped God would create more mountains around the world that no one had climbed. When her father asked what she would ask from God, Yuzuha said she wished time could stand still, because in this world, only her father and the mountains were willing to accept the real her. Not long after, rumors spread that Yuzuha's father had faked his solo, oxygen-free climb of Mount Everest. Yuzuha was bombarded by reporters, but her father told her he had never lied and set off again with his climbing gear. After that, the media began to discredit Yuzuha's father, and eventually, he disappeared into the mountains. During this period, Yuzuha was very depressed. Alice woke up. Yuzuha had gotten up to serve the meal she prepared and placed it next to him. He asked her why she had saved him. Yuzuha replied that his body showed a will to live. In despair, Alice said everyone died because of him. He killed them and he should die, but now he was so hungry. Yuzuha said she had thought about death too, but like him, after lying down for a long time, her stomach started to growl. They would all die sooner or later, so they might as well eat this meal before they did. After eating, Yuzuha went out for a morning run. When she returned, she found that Alice had finished all the food. She asked him why he had gambled with his life to save everyone during the game of hide and seek. Alice told her that he didn't want to die at that time, and he didn't want to watch others perish either. Yuzuha said she didn't want him to die, and thanks to his actions, she was able to survive. So she decided to repay Alice. Her words rekindled Alice's will to live. After nightfall, the two followed the instructions to the game venue. It was a long tunnel, and in the tunnel, there was a bus covered in graffiti. 3 men were sitting on the bus. They had met by chance in a game and had cooperated in 3 games since then. Yuzuha noticed that Takuma had a leg injury. Takuma cautiously tucked his leg in. At that moment, a notification came on the phone. Registration was closed, and the game called Distance was about to start, and the difficulty level was the 4 of clubs, which required team cooperation. The rules were to endure the test within a time limit of 120 minutes and reach the end point safely to pass. Takuma panicked, wondering if they were supposed to run on the highway. He tried to stand up, but his foot hurt terribly. His companion, Yamane, told him not to move and went to the front to try and start the bus, which used an old engine. However, the gas tank was empty. Seeing this, Takuma urged his companions to leave quickly and not worry about him. But Yamane didn't want to abandon him. Takuma became agitated, urging him to pass the game and reunite with his pregnant wife. Takuma watched his 2 companions leave with pained eyes and sat back in the last row. Alice watched Takuma, reminded of his own 2 friends. Yuzuha told Alice that Takuma had made the right choice. At this point, 10 minutes had already passed. Alice and the other three began to jog forward. As he ran, Alice wondered where exactly the endpoint was. The distance displayed on the phone kept increasing, and before they knew it, they had run 5 kilometers. They saw a table set up not far away, with a sign that read, "Supply Station." Cezanne, parched with thirst, reached for a bottle of water, but Yamane stopped him. Just then, Alice also reached for some water. Yuzuha noticed the look in Yamane's eyes and immediately understood that he wanted them to drink it first to test for poison. So, Yuzuha took out her own water cup and handed it to Alice. After Alice had taken a few sips, he saw the envious looks of Cezanne and Yamane and offered the water to them. Yuzuha hadn't even had a drink herself. Afterward, the 4 of them continued their journey. At the 6-kilometer mark, they encountered many parked cars. Yuzuha, being alert, said there was something up ahead, but the 3 men saw nothing. Suddenly, a black panther sprang out. Everyone was terrified and scattered in all directions. Yamane dived under a car. The panther was too big to get under, so it leapt onto the car roof and launched an attack on Alice and Yuzuha. Yuzuha easily escaped and used a flare from the car to temporarily drive the panther away. She rescued Alice and Takuma and they fled together. Unfortunately, Cezanne was left behind. He was pounced on by the suddenly emerged panther in a gruesome scene. Cezanne told everyone to escape while they could. Shortly after, he was dragged away by the panther. Yamane was so distraught that he didn't want to run anymore, saying that even though he had only been with them for a week, it felt like they had been old friends for a long time. Alice encouraged Yamane to survive and tell his wife the stories of Takuma and Cezanne. Inspired, Yamane decided to continue onward. Upon reaching the 8-kilometer mark, Alice spotted an old diesel engine motorcycle on a small truck. His eyes lit up. Chota had once said that all electrical appliances using crystal circuit boards were destroyed, but objects not controlled electronically could still function. This meant that the motorcycle in front of them, as well as the bus at the starting point, could still operate. Alice shook the Tesla motorcycle and discovered that there was quite a bit of diesel fuel in the tank. Coincidentally, that bus also ran on diesel. Yuzuha realized Alice's intention was to take the motorcycle back to the starting point to start the bus and save Takuma. She worried that this action might cost Alice his chance to finish the game in time. Alice reassured her they still had half the time left and told her to go ahead to the end point. He would catch up later because he didn't want to ignore a life in danger again. And so, Alice began to push the heavy motorcycle back the way they came. Along the way, he caught sight of Cezanne's body. Yuzuha and Yamane continued to run forward. They discovered a large iron gate up ahead and thought they were nearing the end point, so they decided to wait there for Alice and Takuma. The countdown showed 15 minutes left. Back at the bus, Takuma, who had resigned himself to death, was shocked to see Alice. He wiped his tear-soaked eyes in disbelief. Alice also seemed to see something astonishing and opened his mouth wide in surprise. At this point, there were 5 minutes left until the end. Yuzuha and Yamane heard strange noises, and then the nails on the iron gate started flying out one by one. Water surged out. Seeing the danger, they turned and ran. In the blink of an eye, the iron gate was washed away. Yamane, out of energy, fell. He picked up a picture of his wife and him, but it was too late to run. In the last second, he was swallowed by the tide while clutching the photo. Yuzuha kept running desperately when suddenly Takuma appeared, driving the bus towards her. Alice reached out and pulled Yuzuha into the bus, closing the door behind them. The bus was then flipped over by the tide. After a while, Yuzuha opened her eyes to discover that the 3 of them were still alive. They crawled out of the bus and saw the word "endpoint" graffitied on the side of the bus. They had been at the endpoint all along. The distance indicated on the phone was actually the distance between them and the endpoint. If they had stayed at the original place, they would have cleared the game directly. Their phones received messages congratulating the 3 of them for successfully clearing the game. Takuma was about to leave, but Alice called out to him asking him where he was going. Takuma replied that he didn't know. If they survived, they would meet somewhere next time. Takuma probably insisted on leaving because he was afraid his foot injury would slow the group down. Alice told Yuzuha that he planned to go to the beach to find the mastermind behind this absurd game, restore the world to its original state, and avenge their companions, so he had to survive. Then, Alice got on the bus with Yuzuha, and they set off towards the beach. With only 3 days left until the expiration of Alice's and Yuzuha's visa, they had yet to find the beach. Alice was determined to reach the beach within these 3 days and put an end to this absurd game. For the first time in his life, he felt the brevity of existence. He needed to learn to survive, strive to not be a burden to Yuzuha, and live up to the trust of his companions. At night, he and Yuzuha separately lay in ambush near 2 game venues, covertly observing every move of the participants. After the game ended, they followed players who had similar club locker keys in their possession and found them getting into cars and driving away. So they chased after the vehicles in a bid to uncover clues related to the beach. Standing on a bridge, they carefully observed with a telescope and spotted the word beach on a lit building across the river. Suddenly, someone appeared from behind and knocked them unconscious. They were taken to a tall building and questioned about why they were snooping around the beach. Alice explained that they believed reaching the beach would reveal the secrets of the game and the disappearances. Hearing this, the leader named Hatter walked in and welcomed them to the beach, an utopia he created for the game players trapped inside this game world. He then opened a wooden door in front of them. An enlarged deck of cards appeared before their eyes. Hatter said there was only one way to end this hellish nightmare and escape the hell world: to gather all the playing cards through the game. Yuzuha asked whether collecting all the remaining cards would restore the world to its original state. Hatter replied that the world would not return to its original form. Only the selected ones could return to their original world. But it was impossible to achieve this alone, so it required a team of like-minded individuals. That was the purpose of the beach. Hatter hoped that Alice and Yuzuha would stay and took the cards from them. He told them that it was not the people of Tokyo who disappeared, but they had strayed into a mysterious realm. Therefore, there must be a way back, and that's why they established the beach, generating electricity with fuel-driven generators, using rainwater as a water source, and collecting weapons everywhere. Living in the beach required adherence to 3 rules. The first, one must wear a swimsuit at the beach as it prevented the concealment of weapons and enhanced safety. The second rule, all playing cards were the property of the beach, and those who contributed to the collection would get a rank promotion. Once everyone worked together to send the first person out of the game world, they would send the second and third person out in order of rank using a large number of duplicate cards. Alice found this a bit far-fetched and asked what would happen if they refused. Hatter then stated the third rule: traitors were sentenced to death. Alice felt guilty for getting Yuzuha involved, but she didn't blame him, saying it was her own choice. Hatter, after taking the 7 of hearts from Alice's hand, was ecstatic, saying he would consider promoting Alice and Yuzuha in rank. The residents of the beach town were enjoying a wild party, numbed by the influence of alcohol. Yuzuha felt that they were merely escaping from reality. Just as she thought this, a horn blared over the loudspeakers, causing everyone to rush into the hall. Hatter showed up, encouraging everyone to participate in the game. Hatter undeniably had the charisma of a leader. With just a few words, he had everyone fired up and forgetting their fear of the game. Alice and Yuzuha were split into different games, both promising to survive at all costs. Soon after, the beach town sent out several cars carrying competitors to different game venues. Yuzuha's game was Bingo in Match Factory. The requirement was to find numbers hidden within 24 rooms, and finding all would mean passing the game. Aguni led a group of marshal members, armed with assault rifles, into a beast-hunting game. Faced with an oncoming tiger, Aguni calmly shot at it and skillfully threw it aside as it pounced on him. Alice, following the coroner Anne, went to the basement to participate in the light bulb puzzle game. Anne explained that this game was to test if Alice was suitable to serve as a beach executive. A pretty young lady named Hikari and a young boy who had participated in the hide-and-seek game also joined this game with 3 other contestants. As soon as they entered the game venue, everyone was dumbfounded. 4 pipes in the room were continuously pumping water into the room. Just then, a text message arrived announcing the registration deadline. The game difficulty was set at 4 of diamonds, which was the last diamond card that the beach needed. The game's passing condition was to find the light bulb switch. Rule 1. Only one of the 3 switches could light up the bulb. Rule 2. With the door open, there was only one chance to flip the switch. If the door was closed, there was no limit to the number of times the switch could be flipped. Rule 3. If someone or a switch was inside the smaller room, the door would lock and could not be opened. The whole group only had one chance to answer. If they answered correctly, they would pass. Meanwhile, the water level was rising, and the game would end if the water touched the electric wire. As soon as the rules were announced, a reckless girl reached out to touch the electric wire in front of her. She was electrocuted on the spot, shocking everyone who saw it. Hatter was preparing to enter the room, suggesting everyone take turns to test the switches. Alice warned that once he goes in, the door won't be able to close. This sparked intense discussions among the group, but no conclusion was reached. Anne asked Alice what he thought. Alice suggested first opening the door, then the switch. If it didn't light up, they would have to choose from the remaining two. Anne accused Alice of gambling with their lives, knowing the answer but refusing to reveal it to test Alice. Prompted by Hikari, Alice prepared to open switch A. Suddenly recalling the game rules, he shouted to close the door. Upon hearing this, Anne smiled satisfactorily. Hikari and Hatter shut the door, and Alice turned off switch A. Just as the water reached their necks, he instructed them to open the door, then turned off switch B. The light bulb didn't light up. Alice then instructed Hikari to touch the light bulb. She did, and immediately pulled back from the heat. After turning off switch A, the machine's humming stopped, as did the flow of water. The water level was now just 2 centimeters away from the electric wire. Seeing the pass notification on the phone, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Alice explained that the light bulb was tungsten filament. If it had just been lit, it would be hot. If not, it would be cool. Added with the fact that they had one chance to visually confirm, the answer had to be A. Anne agreed that this method increased their chance of correctness from 66% to 100%. The game was over. Alice was searching for Yuzuha by the poolside, and likewise, Yuzuha was also looking for him. When their eyes met, they both smiled in relief. Hikari sensed their special relationship and suggested they get together, as the uncertainty of tomorrow was undeniable. Hikari shared that her mother was in the hospital and she had been forced to come here. She wanted to return to her original world to care for her mother, even quitting smoking, which she had struggled with before. Suddenly, Aguni and his men stormed into the pool. Hikari cautioned Alice not to provoke them if he wanted to live peacefully at the beach. Aguni used to be a military officer in charge of all the weapons at the beach. The beach residents were divided by 2 factions. The idealist faction was led by Hatter, while the martial faction led by Aguni. Hatter and Aguni were currently in control of the beach, but a conflict could arise between the 2 factions at any time. As they were talking, Aguni and his men walked straight towards Alice, ordering his men to take Yuzuha away for ill intentions. Alice rose to stop them. Hikari advised him not to provoke the martial faction, but he didn't listen. Aguni threatened to break Alice's leg again, but Alice didn't back down. Hatter then appeared, asking Aguni to refrain from bothering the new guy for his sake. After a standoff, Aguni decided to back down. Hatter then called all the executives to gather in the conference room and invited Alice to join them. Alice was surprised to see Taro waving at him from the executive seats. In the meeting, one of the beach executives, Kano, said they hadn't encountered a single Joker card yet, and only the 10 of hearts remained. Hatter ordered Anne to continue investigating the game venues in Tokyo, pay attention to the visa expiration dates, and wait for the 10 of hearts to appear. He also needed to renew his visa as soon as possible. Kano suggested a way to earn more visa days by taking emotionally numb individuals to participate in the heart game of mutual betrayal. She jeered that the 7 of hearts game Alice passed didn't require any thinking. Hatter said he would participate in the next game, confident he could pass whether it was a spade or heart game. After the meeting, Hatter told Alice that he used to run a male host club called Beach in Kabukicho. He was determined to make it the best club in the area. He worked tirelessly and always reminded his men to never lose their human dignity. However, one of them couldn't handle the pressure and hanged himself in the dormitory. Looking back, Hatter thought that the man's death might have been a necessary sacrifice for his own growth, just like how everyone at the new beach has to give it their all, even risking their lives to make him the unique hero. Therefore, tragedy is inevitable for a hero. In the early morning, Hatter put all the poker cards into his treasure chest. Alice went around asking the residents of Beach for clues about the disappearances, but the more he heard, the more hopeless he felt. He tried to ask the girls Momoka and Asahi, but they ran away immediately. Then, Alice heard several gunshots. After the martial faction left, he went over and was stunned to see a box full of corpses. At this point, Taro and Hikari appeared, revealing to Alice the true face of Utopian Beach, where Rule Number 3 stipulated that traitors were sentenced to death. Taro asked Alice what he intended to do with all the information he was collecting. Alice said he wanted to find out who planned the game and identify the mastermind who killed his 2 friends. He hoped to return to his original world, or at least send Yuzuha back. Taro scoffed at his unrealistic idea, but claimed to have a plan that could change the current situation. Hatter had always been suppressing the martial faction, but he was gradually losing control. So Taro planned to steal all the poker cards and escape the beach. In the evening, everyone joyfully sent off Hatter to participate in the game. Alice told Yuzuha that the beach was a utopia created through the charismatic leadership. However, in reality, there was no such thing as a utopia. Hatter and his men drove to Kabukicho, but unexpectedly the next day, Hatter's body was found in Shinjuku by a mechanic who was in charge of car maintenance at that time. The body was brought back to the beach. It seemed that Hatter was killed by a gunshot, and some said they heard gunshots near the game venue. To stabilize people's emotions, Executive Kano suggested keeping this a secret for now. The executive in glasses said that according to the rules, he, being the second in command, should take over the leadership. However, Suguru, one of Aguni's subordinates, disagreed. He argued that with the death of Hatter, the power should be transferred. He proposed a vote for Aguni as the leader. Seeing no one raising their hands, Suguru signaled the tattoo man to use force to intimidate them. Eventually, all the executives had to raise their hands in agreement. Thus, Aguni became the new king of the beach. Suguru urged to open the black envelope immediately. It turned out that all the poker cards won in the game were stored in a safe in Hatter's royal suite. The password was written on a piece of paper, sealed in the black envelope. It could only be opened when the leadership changed. The new leader would confirm the password in front of all the executives, then put the password paper back into a new envelope and seal it again, keeping it with the signatures of all the executives. Taro asked Alice to sneak into the royal suite, find the safe, and steal all the poker cards. Yuzuha thought it was too dangerous and that they could lose their lives if discovered. But Alice believed that with Hatter's death, the cohesion of the beach was dissolving, and they needed to execute this plan now. At this point, Suguru gathered everyone in the hall, announcing that Hatter had lost yesterday's game and hadn't returned. The new king of the beach was Aguni. This revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Simultaneously, Taro signaled Alice to begin their operation. Alice stealthily infiltrated the royal suite, finding a safe within a wardrobe. He inquired about the password over the intercom. Taro mentioned that he had observed Aguni's face darken with surprise and confusion upon seeing the password, leading him to surmise that the envelope contained a blank piece of paper. The password was likely the mirrored text imprinted by Hatter's ring, 8022. However, when he entered the password, the safe didn't open, and an alarm was triggered. Aguni entered with his henchmen, followed by a smirking Taro and Yuzuha, who had been forcibly brought along. Apparently, both Alice and Yuzuha had been tricked by Taro. Alice attempted to save Yuzuha, but was beaten and knocked down by Suguru. Aguni expressed his thanks for Taro's tip-off, while his gaze unwittingly shifted to the deer painting on the wall. Alice was bound, gagged, and led into a room. Suguru intended to deprive him of his hearing and vision before his visa expired, leaving him to await his death in agonizing anticipation. Meanwhile, he intended to party with Yuzuha. Alice was driven to despair, but he was helpless. The situation was worse than death. Elsewhere, the coroner Anne extracted a bullet from Hatter's body and fell into deep thought. Taro assigned Hikari to stand guard outside Aguni's room. He told Hikari over the intercom that when Alice was captured, he noticed Aguni, who usually maintained a poker face, continually glancing at the painting on the wall. Therefore, he believed that the black envelope didn't contain a password or a blank paper, but a picture. Sure enough, Taro found a safe behind the painting and successfully opened it with the password 8022, taking all the poker cards. Suguru brought Yuzuha back to his room, intending to force himself on her, but she bit his juicy tongue in her defense. Enraged and humiliated, Suguru swung a punch at Yuzuha's face. Suddenly, the TV in the room switched on automatically, and all the lights in the beach lit up. Taro prepared to flee the beach. Hikari asked if he felt any sympathy for Alice, who he had taken advantage of. Taro responded that he felt a lot of sympathy for him, but for survival, there was nothing one wouldn't do. He noticed something was off, stopped Hikari, who was about to leave the beach, and threw out a bracelet. It was immediately burned through. As it turned out, the beach had been completely taken over by the game runners. The entire area was surrounded by a laser net, making it impossible to leave. The voice of the game host echoed through the loudspeakers, saying that they had organized a game for all the guests. The difficulty level was set to 10 of hearts. In the midst of the chaos, Yuzuha managed to escape from Suguru's room. Everyone rushed into the hall, where they found the girl, Momoka, dead on the floor, a dagger buried in her chest. A notification popped up on their phones stating that this game was a murderer hunt. The murderer who had taken Momoka's life was hiding among them. The murderer could be of any gender. The mission was to find and burn the murderer at the stake within 2 hours to successfully clear the game. At that moment, a bonfire was lit behind the building. Some suspected that the murderer was Asahi, Momoka's close friend. Suguru immediately ordered his men to seize Asahi and throw her into the fire. Yuzuha and Kano stepped forward to intervene. Yuzuha argued that no one had an alibi, so they couldn't simply accuse someone without proof. Anne asked everyone to recount what they had done within the past hour. In the middle of this, someone pointed out that Anne's hands were stained with blood, suspecting she was the murderer. Anne explained that it was from investigating Hatter's body. This revelation shocked everyone. She explained further that Hatter had been murdered, and the executives had decided to conceal this temporarily to avoid panicking everyone. Anne then produced a bullet she had extracted from Hatter's body, stating that the grooves on it matched the guns managed by Beach. This implied a Beach member had killed Hatter. One girl suspected that the murderer was hiding among the Marshall faction, but just then she was stabbed through the heart by the tattoo man's long knife and died on the spot. Aguni then stepped into the crowd and demanded the murderer reveal himself, or else everyone not in the Marshall faction would be thrown into the fire. The crowd instantly became restless. Suguru, in a playful mood, fired his gun at the ceiling. The crowd began to scatter in panic. Yuzuha grabbed Asahi and fled the hall. Then Suguru and his men began a massacre, killing anyone they saw. Asahi asked to join Yuzuha in searching for Alice. The mechanic and a man also volunteered to join the search party. Suguru, finding it troublesome to dispose of the bodies, simply ordered his men to lure everyone into the courtyard while he sniped them from the rooftop. The tattoo man was even more frenzied, pouring gasoline on the ground and setting the building on fire, planning to smoke out those hiding in their rooms. Yuzuha and her group went from room to room searching for the main male character. They were shocked to discover a member of the Marshall faction sitting in a bathtub with a gun, trembling. He couldn't bring himself to shoot his friends. Yuzuha learned from him that Alice was indeed held in this building. They got information from a girl from the Marshall faction that Alice was detained on the 4th floor. Taro and Hikari hid in the surveillance room. Hikari noticed Anne was looking for something in the office. Anne revealed she was searching for super glue. By heating the gel and placing the murder weapon on it, she could extract fingerprints from the weapon's surface. Then, by finding an object used by the suspect and adhering cocoa powder to the fingerprint's grease, she could collect the fingerprints with clear tape, thus identifying the real murderer. Learning that Anne had once been a forensic scientist in the police department, Hikari felt hopeful. However, the tattoo man blocked their path. Hikari told Anne to go ahead and clear the game, promising to handle the situation. Smoke filled the building. The poor Alice struggled until he passed out. People rushed out of their rooms and headed for the new pavilion, but as soon as they entered, they became human targets for the Marshall faction. When they tried to retreat, they found themselves caught in a pincer attack. Suguru, looking through his scope, saw a bewildered young man and was reminded of his own days of being bullied by bad students. Now, he wanted to take revenge on these innocent people. Taro made it to the rooftop and taunted Suguru for taking pleasure in bullying the weak. Suguru had long disliked him. The two decided to settle their scores. Suguru aimed his sniper rifle, but Taro rushed out, throwing a bunch of poker cards as a diversion, and lit a lighter tied to a water gun filled with gasoline, shooting it at Suguru. Before Suguru could react, he was engulfed in flames, screaming as he fell from the rooftop. At the same time, the tattoo man drew his samurai sword and attacked Hikari. He was curious why Hikari could fight so well. The truth was, Hikari was a man who had learned karate from his father since he was a child. However, he always hesitated before delivering a fatal blow. His father was furious when he found Hikari applying lipstick like a girl and kicked him out of the house. It was hard to imagine that the tattoo man was originally a literary homebody who could never find the true meaning of life until he participated in his first game. It was the first time he felt truly alive. Afterwards, he shaved his head and covered his body with tattoos. Hikari said they all hated their pasts, but to survive, they had to face their pasts again. Then the two began a real fight. The tattoo man mocked Hikari, claiming her determination to survive was weaker than his own. Remembering her seriously ill mother in the real world and her desire to take care of her, Hikari decided to show the tattoo man her true resolve. Elsewhere, Alice dreamed of himself drinking at a bar with his two best friends. They encouraged him to survive no matter what. Suddenly, he woke up, mustering all his strength to remove the tape from his mouth and shouting for help. Yuzuha heard his call and located the room he was in, preparing to break in. However, the martial faction caught up. Yuzuha quickly escaped through the window. With the help of the mechanic and Asahi, they rescued Alice. There was still half an hour left before the game ended. After hearing the game rules, Alice believed that the game's organizers intended for all the beach players to lose. The mechanic suspected that the murderer of Momoka was a member of the martial faction, but Alice disagreed. He argued that if things continued this way, the martial faction would end up killing each other, which was not the aim of the game. The Hearts game required everyone to betray each other and fight to the death. Only under extreme emotional distress could the game be cleared. So, he had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. Aguni, watching body after body being thrown into the fire, thought of Hatter again. Hatter was an old friend of his. To fulfill his father's last words, Hatter gave up his job in Kabukicho and took over the hat shop. When he found out that Aguni had become a military officer, Hatter made him swear to live a long life, as he was his only remaining friend. A moment later, Alice suddenly realized that after Hatter was killed and Momoka was murdered, the game organizers were probably waiting for this moment. The question was, why start the game at this time? At that moment, Anne extracted fingerprints from the dagger and was shocked at the result. She wanted to run out and notify everyone, but was attacked by the martial faction. There were only 20 minutes left before the game ended. Alice suddenly stood up, having guessed the real identity of the murderer. With 15 minutes left before the game ended, Aguni ordered his men to kill everyone. Alice shouted at him to stop, and with the help of his friends, walked to the hall. He told Aguni that he had been imprisoned by them, so he was not the murderer. If Aguni was not the murderer, he wouldn't have to kill him. Alice then proposed they should work together to find the murderer. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Aguni beat up Alice. Yuzuha said in a hurry that now she knew Aguni was the murderer. Her words made everyone suspicious of Aguni. The martial faction even pointed their guns at him. Aguni did not argue. He simply dropped his gun and put his chest against his man's gun, angrily telling him to shoot. But Alice said Aguni was not the murderer. The Hearts game was about manipulating people's hearts. It was not a game that could be cleared by taking down Aguni. Alice then told him that the person Aguni killed wasn't Momoka, it was Hatter. That self-loathing in Aguni's eyes is exactly like the day he killed his friend. The martial faction had so many guns, they should have suppressed the beach long ago, but Aguni never did that. In this way, Alice believed that Aguni and Hatter were not enemies to each other, but close friends. The both had been suppressing dangerous elements like Suguru from getting out of control. Aguni just wanted to stop the out-of-control Hatter and make him revert to his old self. That proves to be true. In the beginning, Hatter and Aguni created Utopia Beach here to save people who had fallen into despair after being trapped in this game world. They wanted everyone to gather all the poker cards so they could return to their original world together. However, when Hatter accidentally discovered that some people were hoarding poker cards, he killed them all in a fit of rage. Alice's words hit Aguni where it hurt. He began to beat Alice again, and despite Yuzuha and the mechanic's attempts to stop him, it was to no avail. It's then revealed that after Hatter's game was cleared that day, he arranged to meet Aguni at the Kabukicho Beach Club. Aguni confessed that he was struggling to contain Suguru and the martial faction, so he urged Hatter to disband the beach, stating that the idea of returning to the original world by collecting the poker cards was just a beautiful lie invented by Hatter. He felt that having friends he could rely on was enough for him. There was no need for the beach. Looking at Aguni, Hatter finally turned away in pain and said that sometimes a king was forced to make difficult decisions. As he finished speaking, he aimed his gun at Aguni. In the moment he pulled the trigger, Aguni instinctively shot Hatter. Alice said that Aguni killed his own friend, and now he planned to kill all these beach residents who drove him mad. The game's organizers are taking advantage of his despair. This is the Hearts game. Perhaps there really was a way to spare all the living. For example, the murderer of Momoka could be Momoka herself. Upon hearing this, Aguni kicked Alice over, retorting that he was the murderer. Aguni started to provoke them, ready to have everyone buried with him. In fact, after Hatter's death, Aguni discovered that there were no bullets in Hatter's gun. He was filled with remorse, but it was already too late. The situation spiraled out of control once again. Just then, Asahi said to Alice that she had a way to stop Aguni, asking them to throw Momoka into the bonfire and put an end to this mutual killing. After she finished, she went to the center of the hall and astonishingly told everyone that she was the dealer of the game. As soon as her words fell, a laser beam came from the sky and pierced Asahi's head. Everyone was stunned by the revelation. At this moment, the coroner Anne told everyone that the fingerprints on the dagger are reversed, meaning Momoka stabbed herself in the chest. The one who murdered Momoka is actually Momoka herself. Alice begged Aguni not to let the will of these dead people go in vain. They were still alive, struggling to face despair and fight to the end. For a moment, everyone was moved by Alice's words. They were preparing to throw Momoka's body into the bonfire when bullets started flying from a distance. Suguru was not dead yet. In a fit of madness, he threw a torch into the hall and started shooting wildly with a gun. Yuzuha agilely leapt onto his back. Alice also jumped in to help, but they were both thrown off by Suguru. Just as Suguru was aiming his gun at Alice, Aguni leapt out and charged at Suguru, hurtling towards the bullets. Pushing Suguru, they both rushed into the bonfire, perishing together. With 3 minutes left until the end of the game, everyone worked together to throw Momoka's body into the fire. Alice found that Asahi's phone was recording a video and picked it up curiously. Soon, everyone received a message that they had cleared the game. The tattoo man did not die, but he lost interest in living. He felt that what he had at this moment was the ultimate freedom he had been seeking. Everyone looked at the beach home being swallowed by the fire, filled with a myriad of emotions. Taro picked up the 10 of Hearts poker card on the table. With this, he had collected all the poker cards except for the Joker card. The next day, Alice viewed the video on Asahi's phone. In the selfie video, Asahi said that after people disappeared, she and her friend Momoka were called by the game organizers to participate in designing the game. There was a game operating base underneath the subway station. They would sometimes participate in the game pretending to be ghosts or players, causing chaos or being forced to help prepare the game. But they were also constantly monitored in the game. If they confessed to the players that they were the game dealers, they would be killed. Once, Momoka saw many people die in the game they had helped design and felt immense guilt, nearly breaking down. Learning of the information, Alice and Yuzuha went to the said subway station to search for the game base. The subway doors were open. As they cautiously entered, they found that all the staff in the building had been shot. Suddenly, Taro and Hikari appeared. Taro had found a piece of paper on the horse mask ghost and took a long time to figure out that it was a subway map. Taro said that the only thing that could be confirmed was that the staff here were not the game organizers. There were others above them. When Yuzuha asked who they were, Taro replied that it could be aliens or gods. As he finished speaking, the lights in the room suddenly turned on. Kano then appeared on the screen, saying that except for the Joker card, they had cleared all the games, and she was so moved by the victory built on numerous sacrifices. So she had a new game as a gift for them, and the second stage would be held at noon tomorrow. The new game was to start again, but this time, Alice had a clear goal. As they left the subway station, a hot air balloon floated over the center of Shibuya, carrying a huge King of Spades poker card. Alice was determined to find the answer. Meanwhile, other areas of Tokyo were also about to start the Joker card game, indicating that people trapped inside the game world were brought into the second stage of the mysterious challenge. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.